I don't think we're going to be open those dates.
Morning, members, staff. I officially open the September meeting of council. And with that, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout the Barossa region and recognise their continued connection to the land, waters and culture, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Members, I am going to remove my mask when I speak because I fog up and I can't see a thing. So with the leave of the meeting, I'm just going to remove my mask at the appropriate times. 1.4, we have an apology for the absence of Councillor Leonie Boothby. Will someone move that motion? Moved Councillor De Vries, seconded Councillor Johnston. All those in favour? Carried. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 17th of August 2021 at 9 a.m. Someone like to move those minutes be accepted? Moved Councillor Hearn, seconded Councillor Hayden. All those in favour? Carried. No matters arising. We'll move to item 1.7.1, a petition for the Barossa Trail, request for that to be completed. There is a report attached to that on page 5.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor De Vries, seconded Councillor Johnston, and I assume we'll just give an appropriate reply back as part of that.
Through me, that's correct. We'll respond confirming the estimated times for tender. As you know, it's out for tender at the moment. Yep. And that'll come back with a construction plan.
Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Item 2.1, the Mayor's report. Just touch on the gathering at the Herbic Tree, which was a fairly significant gathering with the various representation there. I know Councillor Troop, you were keen to be there, but you were an apology. But it was very, very well received, and a lot of good conversations between the Herbic family and representatives from the Paramax tribe, so it was really good. Any questions? Someone like to move that motion? Councillor De Vries, seconded Councillor Johnston. All those in favour? Carried. Consensus agenda. Is there any items that any members wish to have excluded from the consensus agenda? Not, will someone move the consensus? Moved Councillor Miller and seconded Councillor Hearn. All those in favour? Carried. We'll move to the debate agenda. The item 7.2.1, the 2020-2021 draft annual financial statements of council on page 97. Thanks, Ben. Yep. Any questions?
I'll move the motion.
Moved Councillor Johnston, seconded Councillor Hearn. All those in favour? Carried. Page 99, the monthly financial report as of the 31st of August. On page 99.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved Councillor De Vries, seconded Councillor Haybick. All those in favour? Carried. Page 102, 7.2.3, this is a request for funding to support the Barossa Festival for the Curious. I think we had a workshop item on this some time ago, and now it's come back for council to consider. Any questions? Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, what question I've got, I see it's asking, the recommendation is 5,000 and 2,000 cash in kind. Does that mean the 30,000 will still be on the agenda at a later stage?
Yep.
Through you, Mr Mayor. The request from Release Creative was for a support of $30,000 for the preview event. The recommendation is what is in front of you for an amount of $5,000 plus $2,000 to cover the in-kind. But also in the discussion, it's recognised that further discussion and further collaboration take place ahead of the full event in October 2022.
So that is still live, that extra 30,000 later stage?
If you move if council resolve or move the recommendation that's there in front of you today, Barossa Creative will receive $5,000 cash plus a contribution of $2,000 towards waste management, labour, etc., to cover traffic management and the like. What is suggested is that we continue those discussions to continue to build that relationship and look towards perhaps another workshop or a council report, if that's what the direction is, to seek further funding for the full event in 2022.
Councillor Angus.
I'm going to move the recommendation there.
Okay, thank you. And seconded, Councillor Johnston. Would you like to speak to the...
Only to say that I believe the arts well and truly deserve to be funded. This is, as Mr Elding has pointed out, an interim event before I think what is planned to be a much bigger event next year. We need to give them a bit of a hand up and make sure that they have a good foundation to get this event up and running and recognised. So I'd urge you to support it.
Councillor Johnston.
I echo John's comments, and I think that it's prudent that we don't advance the whole amount of money, because who knows what's happening in the next several weeks.
Just, if I can, I'll go back to Councillor Barrett's question. I think what you were sort of looking for was there a $30,000 already allocated in the budget?
No, what I was trying to ascertain is, will we now be looking at 25 next time, or will we be looking at 30 next time, when it comes back again?
Yeah, and I think the acting CEO sort of explained it'll be subject to a further report back to council as to we determine how well this initial event goes. So, yep, okay, thank you. Councillor Wee-Smith.
Just a question. I note that the majority of these events are in Light Regional Council and they're putting forward $2,000 in cash. What's the justification? Correct me if I'm wrong. What's the justification for the 5,000 from us in comparison to that?
Look, through you, Mayor, Light Regional Council are providing $2,000 in-kind contribution. That's to cover, I assume, similar things like traffic management, waste services, etc. The 5,000 was, I guess, when we look at what other levels of funding are provided for other similar events, that was the figure that was suggested by officers as a reasonable contribution to support this event, recognising that they were seeking $30,000 for the preview event.
So Light aren't providing any cash support, it's purely in kind at 2,000?
No, I'm guided by the report that I was able to extract, and that is in there in the discussion. That was 2,000 for in-kind contribution.
No problem.
It's not. There are events located in the Barossa region, Angaston, Chateau Tanunda, and Beckwith Park are the three events in this region.
Yep, I note that. As I said, I just noted that there were a lot in Light, so I wanted to see, just equal share there.
Noted. Councillor Troop.
Just a comment, on meeting, the organisers, they are really quite thorough in their, presentations. They've engaged with Reconciliation Committee as well, very interested in engaging with First Nations and, the First Nations in our area. And I was impressed by their comprehensive sort of attitude, and they're actually quite passionate about Barossa, very passionate about Barossa. So, I just thought I'd add that to the mix because I think they're really got our interests at heart. Just thought I'd add that.
Yep, any events are good events these days, I think. Any other further questions or comments? Not. Councillor Angus, do you wish to close the debate?
Only to say that we are the Barossa, not them.
When it suits us.
As
And I
I said before, point noted.
We put our money where our mouth is.
Absolutely.
We can't control them.
Good, eh? Put the motion, all those in favour? Carry. Page 122, the local government reform, feedback to the LGA, 7.3.3. There is an attachment with comments with regard to the commencement of the member behaviour framework and the casual vacancy countback method. Any questions?
Yeah, this one, I just wonder whether there isn't a simpler solution to this potential or perceived problem, particularly regarding the countback for replacing elected members. Why would we need to keep all those ballot papers for 3 years after an election? Why can't it be done at the counting after an election? You get your, in our case, 11 elected members, and then surely they can work out 2 reserves who would be the next people to be called upon if there was a casual vacancy within the first 3 years that needed to be. Why are we making so much, why are we going through it all again? Because that's my reading of the LGA's report, that we've got to keep all these ballot papers and redo it. You've done it once, just spend another 5 minutes and get 2 more results over, which automatically gives you your first and second reserves. Just a comment.
Can I, yes, can I make a comment? My understanding, it was only for the first 12 months if someone passes away, so you don't have to keep all your documentation for a great length of time. And I look at page 125, under the heading Casual Vacancy Elections Countback Method, and the first paragraph talks about someone passing away in the first 12 months of an election.
Yeah.
Someone having ill health.
Look,
Through,
Yep.
if I could clarify,
Yes?
that's correct. The countback system will be for a casual vacancy that's occurring within the first 12 months of the periodic election. What the LGA has asked is how we want to, what our feedback is in terms of which way we want to go, what the preferred option is. If there is, and that vacancy could be as a result of a member passing away or a resignation. If it's outside that period, my understanding is that we'd probably have to do a supplementary election based on, what changes come out of the reform.
I have a question. Where does our current understanding where we allow so many vacancies before we go to where does that fit in this proposal? Can we still have that similar arrangement? I think we lose 2 before we go to periodic
Your
election.
Worship, this council has agreed that we will sit with 10 councillors. But if there was 2 vacancies, then we would have a by-election. That's what currently stands.
Can we still keep that?
With the caveat being within 6 months of the next election, then we wouldn't have a by-election within that period.
Okay.
12 months, I reckon.
No, within 6 months of the next election, if we lost two, we would not have a by-election. It's pointless to have a by-election and then have another election
Exactly.
almost immediately after.
Can you just clarify that, please?
Yep, sure, through you, Mayor. What would need to happen is when the reform sections around supplementary elections commences, council will need to review its supplementary election policy. At that point, officers will bring back how that system will change. Until those sections commence and until we get some more clarification from the LGA as to what those changes mean practically, we'll continue on as we are going. But the idea will be that that council either following the next elections or prior to that will need to have a look at that supplementary elections policy.
Okay, all right. Councillor Johnston.
In the way this is going through you, Mayor, is what happens with the mayor's position, does this policy apply as well? Because it's sometimes in the local government setting, the mayor is also considered an elected member, so does this policy apply for the mayor as well?
Through the mayor, is elected. Yes, I would have to go back and have a look and provide an answer.
Sorry to ambush you.
Our current policy is that the mayor would be replaced by the deputy and then there would be a new election for mayor.
Yeah, that's the way I would have viewed it.
That's true, as an election.
But anyway, that's something we need to sort out.
Yes, I don't know.
So are you, is everyone okay with the recommendation as it sits?
I'll move that way.
Okay, moved councillor Johnston and seconded councillor Haybeck. You wish to speak?
No.
Councillor Haybeck?
Straightforward.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Page 141 is the update on the business continuity plan on page 141. Any questions that anyone has with the particular plan? With the rules of commerce
No, I'll
rolling
move.
along? Councillor Angus
Yeah, happy to move it, the recommendation.
and seconded councillor Johnston. Wish to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Either one? All those in favour? Carried. Page 159 is the principal office and other officers late opening on the 7th of October 2021.
I'll move it, yeah.
Moved councillor Haybeck,
Second.
seconded councillor Troop. Wish to speak?
I just think that people have to be, have suitable training and the office has to be closed for that purpose. Well and good.
Any other comments? All those in favour? Carried. One 1617.3.4, the draft communications strategy framework for 2021-2025. There's a report there with an attachment which talks about the strategy that's been developed to provide a clear framework on how we deliver communications to and with the community and within our organisation. Any questions? Question, councillor Wee-Smith?
Yep, just a question regarding objective 1. There's a point in there that talks about incentivising users to increase their response rate. I'm just wondering what that means, what incentives we're talking about.
Who's got that one?
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Oh, thank you, there you are.
So at the moment, we're considering a range of options to encourage our users to participate and interact with our communication platforms. And so that may be, from time to time, we look at incentivising through some sort of inducement. So if you engage with us, there's a voucher on offer, those sorts of types of incentives and activities to try and encourage that broader engagement. So it's an incentive within the parameters and the remit of what would be appropriate within a local government setting and commensurate with the nature of the engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
then a comment more than a question. Just reading through the strategy there, which I commend officers on, it's very succinct. We've got a number of American spellings and a few other minor grammatical and spelling errors, which I think in our communication strategy we should really have tidied up.
Noted, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Troop?
I've just got it's just a comment. It says the strategy, I'm looking at page 165, it says the strategy is our commitment to respond to an ever-changing communications and digital landscape, and then it says deliver a quality customer experience. I just wonder whether we should switch it around, put the community first, and then like just have the community at the front all the time, and then put the responding to an ever-changing communications and digital landscape. I mean, I think this is a great document, so I don't think it's critical, but I just think always we need to be putting the customer first, rather than, you know, like something practical first. But, you know, that's just one comment. And also, I think that we have struggled in the past with our response to our stakeholders, like communicating with our stakeholders after a decision has been made. And so whether we can flesh out something that is actually, you know, like we looked at our the way we communicated about the pool and things like that. I just think we need to have some sort of strategy in place that we can ensure our stakeholders are actually responded to first, and then we go public. You know what I mean? Like, I just think that might need to be really explored, that area. So, and whether that could be put into that document or whether it's something that lies behind it, I don't know. Because it says adopted digital, this is in page 170, I said all that to say this because now my comment won't come up because I commented on it. But it says a digital first approach for selected council messaging. You know, I think the big things need to be maybe not digital first, it might need to be personal contact first with the stakeholders, and then we go to digital, if that makes sense. So that's just my feedback. Other people might have a different opinion, but I just think that we need to be very sensitive to the people that we've been talking to, that it doesn't come as a great big shock. You know, like a great big shock that we've decided something and they should know first. Does that make sense? Yes? So that was my comment. There wasn't a question.
Communications is always a very interesting topic.
It is. Yeah.
I know that in more recent times, especially through the big project, there's been some comments that there hasn't been ongoing communications when in fact there's been changes of personnel within different committees where the communication has not fallen down on our part, but somehow or other we just got to keep ploughing away at it.
Yeah.
Councillor De Vries?
Yeah, just a comment. This has been an ongoing problem with this council and every council, I guess, like since the year dot. I think we're actually getting it pretty close. We will never get it perfect simply because, as your worship has pointed out, we don't control all aspects of the communication. We're also relying on the community to be engaged. There are some issues which they care passionately about, and there are others where they're pretty happy just to let things roll. I find my own engagement with the state and federal parliament rather depends on what they're proposing at any given moment. Sometimes I'm very closely following what they're doing, other times I really care very little. And I suspect the community feel the same way. We can't control all those outcomes, but we can control our behaviour and the fact that we are taking every reasonable attempt to get the word out there, and I think we are doing very well. My view is that just anecdotally when I speak to people, most people have a pretty reasonable understanding of what's going on out there. They might not understand the fine detail, but they know how to find that information if they wish to. And most people seem to be reasonably well engaged. And my view is that given what a difficult period we're currently going through with COVID and everything else, this community is reasonably united. And while there's always going to be some that are critical of actions that the council are taking, I think overall people seem to be reasonably satisfied. So, and I think we need to applaud those people who are involved and the staff who are conducting our communication at the moment. I think, given that perfect is never possible, I think that what we're doing is actually a pretty good exercise, a pretty good effort all round, so well done.
Look, I've allowed a bit of debate. I think if anyone's happy to move the motion.
Oh, sorry.
I'll move the motion.
I
Yeah.
thought that had already been moved.
Councillor Weeks and seconded Councillor De Vries. Now, do you wish to speak to?
Yeah, seeing as we've started now. As I said before, I think this is a very succinct strategy here, and I commend everyone on that. I take it personally as being quite a high-level approach. I'm sure there's a lot of other work that is going to be done under this, and in particular, I would like to see a lot of work done around our consultation and our communication methods there, because to be quite frank, our consultations aren't that great, and there's one further on in the agenda today that demonstrates that we really aren't cutting through to our community. It's easy to chuck an ad into a paper or, put a post up on Facebook, but I do think we need to make a greater effort to ensure the community understand some of the changes we're trying to make, and those things don't always cut it. As I said, we'll see something later in the agenda that illustrates that point, but again, I think the strategy is great as it is.
Councillor De Vries.
I feel that I'm
I may suggest, if I'm
when we
allowed,
talk, we
when you talk,
makes sense, yeah.
if you don't mind, because it is a bit hard to hear.
I probably spoke pretty much to the point. I think the other thing is that a lot of our communication is informal as much as formal. Sometimes just chatting to members of the community in the pub or in the restaurant or something can be one of the ways in which the word gets out. You speak to, I think, what's the formula? You speak to 8 and then they talk to 5 each, and so the word does sort of progress through the community. I think the main thing from a communication point of view is that you can lead a horse to water. You can't force people to accept the information if they're not interested. However, so long as they know where to find that information if they suddenly find themselves engaged in a particular issue, so long as we do have that easily accessible information for them, then I think we're doing a reasonable job. I think from my mind, the main issue I've had with our communication strategy in the past is that the website itself has been very corporate and not very inviting, and often very difficult to actually, unless you know exactly where to find information, it's been difficult to find that. So providing that is sort of, that improvement continues, and I think we'll be in good shape.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Johnston?
Given we've got a member of the Fourth Estate here, I just wonder whether there's an issue here making sure we don't focus on delivery over social media platforms in preference to print media. I'd be very concerned if for whatever reason our print media was to fade from the community and we relied entirely on electronic platforms, at least for the next foreseeable future. So I'm kind of delighted in a way that this policy is agnostic about that, but I think we need to be aware of that particular risk. If we don't continue to support our local paper, then we're going to find it more difficult to communicate with a portion of our community that's not on social media and chooses not to be. Not because they're old, but because they choose not to be.
Look, I agree wholeheartedly. I think over the years there's been a vast improvement in our communication to the community, and I must compliment our media team for the management particularly supporting the decisions that's made in this chamber, and also in my role as the spokesperson, supporting me with better words than I can come up with most times. But I think the important thing here is also not to lose sight of the fact of with our customer request is also just regularly communicating back. If there's a delay for whatever reason, we need to engage in that regard. I think it's probably that underlying matter down there. It's not so much the high-end media stuff, but it's just that general feedback to the community or where things is at, and that's always difficult. And as we know, quite often, even through our planning process, the words come back quite often. It takes so long, but the other side of the ledger is that our planning people are waiting for information, so there's a two-way engagement with everybody. And I guess, someone wrote somewhere, if you have ears, let them hear, sort of thing, so okay. Anything further?
Close the debate.
Yep, you can close the debate.
I'll ask off now. And just to pick up, Mayor, on what you were saying there too, in terms of customer requests, I agree. My own experience has been that often there's not a lot of communication when you do put through a request, so closing the loop is really important in that regard there. But, back to a broader media, our relationship with the broader media industry here, I think, it's on us to work with the media as much as possible to ensure that our messaging gets out there and they're aware of the changes that we're making or proposing to make. But also, as someone who's sat on the other side of the fence as a journalist, I hope that the media hold us to account too and ask questions of those decisions we're making. That's what a good media should be doing. So that falls to both sides, I think.
Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour? Carried.
Trust me.
Yeah.
Page 174, this is the Angus Recreational Park change room and club room upgrade and the second oval construction. This is a budget review. I'm led to believe that some members were able to go and view the progress of the work that's occurring at the oval. So, any questions? Question?
No, I was going to.
Well, I'll take a question first, if there's a question.
Just a quick one, and I might have got this information if I'd been able to make that visit, but can you just provide some more details regarding the tree replanting? So what kinds of trees we're looking at replanting and what state of maturity? Because obviously any trees we plant are going to take quite some time to reach the maturity that we did have there before. So what are we looking at?
Through you, Mayor, yes. So I've been working together with the new manager operations on that, and they're really taking the lead with that. In terms of the stakeholder consultation, we've been working with the reps from the Angus Rec Park Committee, and we're doing the tree planting in 2 phases. Clearly we want to reinvigorate the new oval once that's ready, but we can't do anything about that just at the moment. But equally we're aware that the community is pretty keen to see some trees going back in. So the first phase of planting is, and again we've had discussions about what size those specimens should be. The preference from the works team is that they are not too big, those specimens. I don't know exactly what size they're going to be, but they're going to be smaller potentially rather than larger mature specimens straight away. We're looking to maintain the mix of the more European, I guess, exotics with some natives as well, because that is the nature of Angus Rec Park, and to put in place what we articulated in the master plan, which was to maintain that parkland feel. So there's about, I can't remember what number I put in the report, but I think 36 trees that should be going in any time. We're just waiting for the council report to come for your attention. And the team's ready to go with those, and they are working jointly with the committee to enable that to happen, and also to ensure that they're maintained so that they thrive as best they can. So it's a good time for us to be planting that first batch. The second batch, in terms of what goes round the oval itself, we'll review that once we can actually see the oval in situ, so to speak, and just again take guidance as to where the most appropriate spots and species are for that particular function as well. So not full detail yet, but we can keep you advised as to what and when that is happening, and we'll certainly be doing some promotion within the community around the fact that we're actually doing that as well.
Question?
Are you finished with?
Yep.
Yeah. As a follow-up to just based on what you said, why did the Works Department decide that it would be preferable to have less mature trees, and how many years of additional growth will we lose as a result of that decision?
In terms of the second answer, second part of that question, I don't know the full extent of that. The discussion was had that they would have a better chance of thriving and establishing. And I certainly raised the fact that the discussions I've had within this chamber amongst elected members is that there seems to be certain people that really favour the more mature species and some that wants to do something a bit smaller. And I've been guided by their advice in respect of that. The park committee were happy with that approach, and so that's the route that we've gone down. There may be a bit of a mixture, and certainly when we look at the oval again, we'll take that into account as well, and see and feed that type of thought process back into the mix. But that was the thinking behind it.
If I could follow up on that, Your Worship, with another question. Would it be possible for us to get that information? And I'd be particularly interested in what level of survival we're talking about. For example, if we're planting 30 trees and 2 die, but we gain an extra 5 years of growth, this is now I'm getting into opinion, I would probably at that point say that's probably a price worth paying. And I'm now straying into debate, so I'll leave it at that point.
Councillor Angus.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Joe and the staff for giving members the opportunity to have a look at the extent of the big project at Angus Rec Park last week. And it's not until you actually get in underneath the building and behind the mesh fencing that you appreciate the size and scale. It really is a huge undertaking, and a 200k variance in the scheme of things, I think is understandable. I think this council has a history of doing things once and doing it properly. I'd like to move this recommendation, and I'd urge you to support it in the spirit of getting the job done, not squabbling over, inter-town rivalry, and I don't think that's on anyone's mind. As far as the trees are concerned, there's probably some very good evidence to suggest that smaller trees will do better quicker, more quickly, than more mature trees. But I take your point, Councillor, that if some die, it may be worth planting more mature ones. But I think that's a suck it and see. But I'd urge you to support the recommendation.
So it's moved, Councillor Angus, seconded Councillor De Vries. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, I do. I'd like to echo all of the comments that Councillor Angus made. Blowouts of this nature are really common, given the weather situation and all of the other points that are raised in the report in regards to costs of things blowing out as a result of COVID and so on. It's frustrating, but it's necessary, and I always factor these things in mentally when we go forward, that there's probably going to be a blowout on the occasional project such as life. A worthy project, and John, every town is passionate about each. We are strongest when we're all moving together, and we can only walk as fast as our weakest link. Anguston needs this desperately, and the Barossa needs this, so it totally gets my support.
Yep. Councillor Haybick.
Yeah, just a comment, Mayor, to back up what's been said. If we build a house and we have an overrun of $10,000, so be it. If we build a project, work on a project such as the extremities of this, we have $1,000 out, so be it, because of the structure. And I was up there and had a look at the work, and especially the digging out of the rock and all the transformation of the whole place and putting in the oval is just unbelievable. I've got no problems about backing that one.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Johnston?
Just an opportunity to be humorous. The larger mature trees are likely to come from nurseries on the outskirts of Melbourne. Let's just keep the Vicks out for the moment.
Any other comments? Councillor Troop?
I'd really appreciate in the report that the mention of the projects delivered within the approved budget. Just like to say that is amazing. We've got so many actual projects that have been achieved within budget, so this is just one of the exceptions, so I really appreciate that. So thank you for putting in the report too.
Thank you. I might just add that what's going on with Ms Thomas and Ms Tappert and the crew and the big project is the biggest this council's ever undertaken and such a variety of activities all happening at the one time. I was fortunate enough to be invited to the football medal count the other night, and the stakeholders are very appreciative of the work that staff is putting in and the support that this council's providing to our sporting community at these recreational facilities. So it's really, really heartening, and there'll be overruns and there'll be underruns, as long as the book's balanced at the end, and we'll make sure that does. Councillor Angus, you want to close the debate, sir?
No, thank you, Mayor. I think enough's been said.
All those in favour? Carried. Page 181 is the consideration of the adoption of the committee resolutions to the Barossa Bush Gardens. These are the minutes from the Barossa Bush Gardens, Section 41 Committee, held on the 11th of August. Any questions? Mover, Councillor Wee Smith, and seconded Councillor Troop. Wish to speak? Any comments? All those in favour? Carried. Page 189. This is the Local Design Reviewed Code Amendment Report, and this is presented to receive the comments of the Local Design Review Code Amendment prepared by Planning SA, and this is to look at the possibility of whether or not, as I understand, the opt-in basis to register in accordance with the scheme for a local design panel.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved Councillor De Vries, seconded Councillor Johnston. You wish to speak to it?
Oh, yes. Plenty to say. Thank you, Your Worship. One of the concerns that I've had, and I've had this conversation with Gary yesterday, and you and I have spoken, and Councillor Angus and I have also been talking about this. We're in a transition period at the moment where we used to have a development plan of our own. This has now been overwritten, if you like, by the state's approach. But we're sort of in a little bit of a limbo state at the moment where we're moving from one system to another, and there may be inadvertent things which occur as a result. So I'm very keen that the council retains as much control as possible of planning until such time as we can fully engage with the community once the new system is up and rolling, so that they can maintain those elements of our uniqueness that we have here in the Barossa, which we regard as part of our heritage, lifestyle and community spirit. The state government clearly wants to apply a more homogenous approach across the state, and from their point of view, if I was sitting in their seat, I'd probably feel the same way. It's simple, it's neat, it's easy, and it's more from a point of view of a developer, it gives them more certainty and more surety, and that is clearly the driving purpose behind it. The downside is it means that the Barossa could end up looking like Manopara or Mawson Lakes, and unless we're very careful about that. Now, the state government has recognised that and is allowing for mechanisms like this to be able to be introduced, where we can allow our own look, feel and attitude to prevail. And it's not really this council's, but it is the communities at large, and we're just simply a conduit by which that can be brought through. So I see this as one tool of many that I think this council should be looking at to try and maintain as much of our unique character as possible going forward, until such time as we can have that more full debate with the community about whether they want to see the Barossa remain as is or whether they want to see it evolve. Maybe they do want to see it go more towards the rest of the state. I have my own views on that, and they'll be expressed later. In regards to the specific idea of having a panel, which helps set the character. The concern that I have about this is that it could be viewed as one extra layer of bureaucracy that people coming into planning would have to jump through. I've spoken to Mr Mavronek about this. My concern is that if we were to, for example, charge people to go through this process, I think that would be a disincentive. And also, if they see it as one extra layer or hurdle of bureaucracy that they have to encounter in order to get the job done, that would be also a disincentive. And given that this, as I understand it, is more of an opt-in than a compulsory measure, I think that would be counterproductive. Light Council seems to be coming up a lot today. Light Council has, rightly or wrongly, got within the minds of some the perception of being more easy to deal with than the Barossa Council when it comes to development. We know that that's not necessarily the case, but perception often trumps reality. And this is one area where Light Council could very easily advantage from us. If we introduced a system like this and they didn't, they could then say, well, we're making life easier for developers to move forward. So with that, I think with those caveats in mind, I think that this is something that we should be going down. And over and above this, I believe that there's been discussion about the potential of bringing up these issues in a workshop in short time. I think that's really important. I think we also need to look very seriously at, as I understand it, the state government's view was that by stripping systematically the ability for this council to actually sit in judgment of development, and this is absolutely the case because there was a time when this council was the development panel, and over time that's been reduced back to now we have one member of that panel, and eventually the panel won't even be the Barossa Council's development panel, it'll be a regional one. So slowly but surely our ability to have influence over decisions in planning are being taken away. I know that's very much not appreciated by a number of vocal members of the community who believe that we are answerable to them, and therefore that by us having that that level of oversight that they have a voice with it being this independent panel that seems to perceive that that voice is being taken away. So the state government, as I was sold this originally, was the idea that they would say, okay, you guys set the parameters, you set the designs and the goals up front, you make those very, very clear. And then the panel will simply administer, if you like, your attitudes and your designs. That's fine, but we need to make sure that we don't take our eye off the ball and allow ourselves to be driven by the agenda. So this is one of those ways in which we can retain some level of control in the input stage. I believe there are others. I think the configuration of the development panel themselves is really important. I know we've had discussions, Councillor Angus, about this in the past. I think possibly this council needs to think about when we actually appoint people to that panel, maybe we have some sort of interview process so that we can actually, where we could have a committee which oversees that, so that because I don't know about you, but I find it very difficult to ascertain somebody's attitudes about anything based on a written CV. But usually a 5-minute conversation, you can get a pretty good idea of how people feel, and we want people who kind of get who we are as the Barossa. So that would be one area they'll be looking at. I also am mindful of the fact that that panel is appointed every 2 years. I would like to see maybe half the panel appointed every 2 years, so it's like the American Senate, so they have, or our Senate too, so you have a half election each, or a half appointment each time. These are other things I think need to be brought up in this workshop, and I'm probably running close to time, so I might leave it at that.
You're right on the money.
There you go.
Ding. Did I get a seconder? I don't think I have.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought.
Sorry, yeah, no, that's all right. Seconder for the...
Yes, you do.
I did I? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Johnston, you wish to speak?
But difficult to follow up on that. I think
Oh, sorry.
I think the only thing about this that I guess is an issue is, are there likely to be any perverse outcomes? I think we think we may notionally gain some control through this particular approach to having some overlays where we try and amplify, if you like, what's intended in the character preservation legislation. So I think the question for us is whether, as Councillor De Vries points out, down the track, whether it will add a layer of bureaucracy and expenses required for development. So I'm cautiously endorsing this because it gives us a sense that we may get control, but I am concerned about the likelihood of adverse outcomes. So hopefully I'm speaking to the motion, but I think we've got no choice.
I'm going to pass to Mr. Maverick, because there has been a bit of discussion the last week or so, and so could you
Good
just
opportunity.
sort of fill us in your take on where we're at and the way forward?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it is a quite interesting concept, this design review panel. It's obviously quite new to our system as how it had operated previously. In a metropolitan context, a design review panel has been in existence for quite a while through ODASA. So developers have the option of going to ODASA to have a design review, particularly for inner city apartment development. So the concept of a local design panel was something that was obviously formulated as part of the expert panel review for the new legislation to be able to give local councils the opportunity to have that design review of significant development within their regions. So ODASA led the development of the scheme under the legislation. Had consultation with council, so our officers, including myself, had meetings with ODASA to how the scheme could operate within the regions and what forms of development would be seen as being appropriate for a local design review. It is obviously a opt-in design review, where a proponent could use the design review panel to improve their proposal before they formally lodge with the authority. So the opportunity there then is they present a project, they send it through to the panel. The panel then might make remarks regarding scale, form, colour, all these elements that could be considered. The proponent could then take on board those comments and then modify their proposal before submitting it to council. Having said that, as a relevant authority, we only have to have regard to that advice as any information that we receive from a referral agency that doesn't have mandatory direction to the planning authority. So yeah, they might say it should be blue, we still think it should be red. So at the end of the day, as the assessing authority, as a relevant authority, we still have the ultimate decision making. But hopefully through this process there will be improvement in design. I mean, that ultimately is the intent of having the scheme in place. As it states, that it is a planning design code, but when you look at the code at present, it's still a planning code, 90% of it. The design component within the code is very limited. So, and therefore as an assessing authority, there's very little principle in the code that relates to design per se. So having a review panel who has the expertise to comment around design is an added value. Having said that, does a panel add that value, or alternatively, can we do something alternatively? Councils could engage a design architect as part of staff to provide that input. Currently, under the current system, we have our heritage architect who provides us with some design comments around certain applications. So arguably, we already have that sort of design review component in our assessment process. So you've got a formal process through the scheme, we have an informal process through our current practices. So there's pros and cons for both. In terms of the fees, there is cost obviously to establish a panel. There's a payment for the registration of the panel, which basically covers the cost of the actual membership and the setup of the panel, similar to the way ODASA works. There's also remuneration for panel members in terms of their time for their input. There is an application fee proposed as part of the scheme, but a lot of the feedback from the council was it would be a disincentive. So there is possibility that the scheme will allow for councils to waiver such a fee to incentivise the process. So, like I said, it's new. It has been working through inner metro councils through ADASA. So this is a first. There is some advantages, as I said, and you'd hope that with that sort of expert input, there would be improvement in the design of projects.
Thank you. Any other comments that anyone wish to make? I think we've spoken about it, having a little bit more conversation about different options and things at a workshop, so, you know.
I'm happy to talk to that as well if you like, Mayor, just very briefly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, look, I think there's been a lot of conversations, and I've had conversations with members for a while, and I think it's appropriate to bring back a conversation at a workshop around how the planning system is operating. Obviously, it's new; it's been operating since March this year. It's we've had our very first application, sort of dealing with the code and how it operates currently. I think it's a good opportunity to sort of talk through some of the issues that, as elected members, you are, dealing with from the community. And it's a good opportunity for us to obviously look at how we can improve our practices as we develop with the new system. We also, and conversations I've had with Councillor Reeves, is obviously in terms of character and amenity and how we retain some of that Barossa feel that we want in the code. As you recall, under the old system, we used to do strategic directions reports. That's a requirement that's no longer in the new system. But having said that, there was a body of work there that was identified, and we were working towards, having some of that through development plan amendments. We were told by previous minister that we weren't to do any development plan amendments, so all councils pretty much stopped all their policy work as we were sort of transitioning to the new system. As we were transitioning to the code, the conversion of the development plan to code, it was meant to be close to policy neutral as possible. So the current development plan should have been reflected as close as possible in the code. It's not policy neutral. It would not be because the whole structure of the code is different from the development plan. So inadvertently or intentionally, the code is different from the development plan. So the types of land uses that are envisaged within zones has changed, as a result of the implementation of the code. We try to work with the department to make sure some of those projects that we wanted to see, particularly around primary production, character, incorporated into the code. At the end of the day, the rules to which the Commission set up the code prevented them from incorporating some of those policy initiatives that we, as one council, as well as all the other councils, wanted to see across the state. So their rules sort of prevented that from happening because of the fact that there was no engagement with the community that would be impacted by that policy change. So the argument is that councils now have to do code amendments. What I'm recommending is that we work through the workshop, go back and visit some of those projects, policy positions that council had in the last strategic directions report. We re-establish the Strategic Development Planning Policy Committee. That's the committee that is responsible for obviously setting that direction. So I think then a follow-up report to that committee with a potential work plan of code amendments and get council formally write to the Commission to initiate some code amendments to address some of these issues.
Thank you. I'm led to believe regionally through the LGA there is a push for an independent assessment of the code since it's been introduced, because where it was being promoted that it's going to be the developers are going to love it, I think from what the meeting that I attended with Legatus and talking to Janine, there is some issues that there's some warrant in pursuing that independent assessment of how it's working at this particular time. And I think we've also written to the Commission to see if they would come and visit with us. So I think it's important, your comments about the workshop and going through that process and looking at our policies and everything would be very timely, especially in light of where we're at with other matters at the moment.
I mean, at the moment, obviously it is only a few months old, as we're working through it, you know, we're finding some technical issues with it. Every council's finding technical issues with it, developers are finding technical issues with it. And I'm not just talking about the code itself, but I'm talking about the portal and the way the legislation is supporting it. So there is some tweaking that is needed. The Commission's already initiated a sort of like a miscellaneous technical code amendment to address some of those potential gaps and shortfalls in the policy. So yeah, councils are hitting roadblocks in terms of the interpretation and what was there previously under the development plan. So these are things that the Commission is looking for councils to provide feedback on.
Yeah, and I think as elected members, we need to be clear, and even the community view everything that comes into this office as being council's decision. And in the case of an independent panel, we're far removed, so it's just a matter of working through and getting that language right, I suppose. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, happy to sum
Yep.
up. I'm going to put this in really simple context. Why us? Why should we be treated as special? Well, we are special. We are the Barossa, and I'm not just saying that, the state government is saying that because we have the protection zone, because they recognise the unique special nature of our area. So this is not something radical. We should be treated separately and we should be allowed to maintain, otherwise why have a protection zone in the first place? Clearly that was envisaged when this all came forward. So what is this all about? I'm going to go to the castle. Mr. Montegiro used to talk about this when they said often in planning it came down to it's the vibe. And how do you actually identify the vibe? Well, this is one of the ways in which we can actually put some form of codification on what the vibe is of the Barossa. It's about lifestyle, it's about heritage, it's about community spirit, and we want that to be reflected in the built forms. We have a very strong residents association which is gaining in strength and size. They are going to want to see that nothing that we have at the moment is lost, that we don't again become just another form of Manopara or Moses Lakes, which are lovely places. But this is the Barossa, it's different, it's special, our protection zone says so, and I want to keep it that way. So this is one of the ways in which we can help protect it. As we spoke about before, I think I agree with the Deputy Mayor that if we allow this to be a disincentive, people won't use it, so that's why I think it needs to be free of charge to the community, and it should be actually constructed in such a way where this actually facilitates development and makes it easier, not becomes a form of bureaucracy that gets in the way of development. And with that, I'll close the meeting.
Thank you.
Close
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Page 250. Which is the
Most exciting part of the meeting.
the bylaws 2021. There is a number of bylaws there. And a report with the relevant attachments for council's consideration. Any questions? Question?
I'm going to follow up on a question I asked at the August meeting when we had the draft bylaws. So we've obviously been to consultation now. I made a suggestion to clause 5 of the dog bylaw in July that we revise that to ask that dogs be on a leash under effective control within 5 metres of a playground. That hasn't been changed. So I'm just wondering what evidence we have or any incidents which necessitate such a clause being included.
Mr Turley?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, certainly recall the discussion and comments that was made at the previous meeting. My understanding is that you're going to provide some feedback through the consultation process, but despite all that, we've been pretty fortunate in that we haven't had too many incidents at children's playgrounds. The inclusion of this is about preventative. Only a couple of weeks ago, there was a couple of northern suburbs councils that had some incidents and quite nasty dog attacks involving dogs in proximity to playgrounds. So fortunately, we've been okay in that regard, but it's about preventative and I guess good governance and management of those spaces.
So to follow on for that, I'm just interested in how we're going to encourage families to enjoy outdoor activities with their whole family. Obviously, as a mother myself, I've got another fur baby that we like to take with us, so how can I take my son to the playground and also exercise my dog? It does make it quite difficult. I'm just concerned we're bringing in red tape here that's not actually necessary.
Through you, Mayor, I'm a parent as well, and I've got young kids as well, so I certainly understand the point. It's probably about balance. Council will need to make a decision about what direction it wants to go. For me, it's about the safety of the kids using the playground as much as anything. And I get the point about some of the hurdles that it may create for those that want to actually have their dogs within arm's reach of the playground facility. But there's other options, just thinking whilst I was sitting in the background, council can look at installing leash holders and posts and all that sort of stuff if there is a need to tie dogs up so they can be kept under control while the kids are on the playground, as an example.
So what you was asking, can you just repeat that again?
So the suggestion I made was that we revise that. At the moment it says dogs are prohibited within 5 metres of a playground. So, you know, we go out to sport every weekend at Stockwell, plenty of the kids have got dogs which they have on leads and they run around the playground and the oval and have lots of fun. So as I said, this is going to impact a lot of people's everyday life, you know, weekend activities. This isn't something minor, it is actually going to have quite an impact, and I don't, you know, we were talking about our communication strategy earlier. This is where I'm concerned that changes like this perhaps haven't been communicated as well as we could have. I don't want to get into debate, I'm conscious of that. But what I would like to see is that we revise this clause to ask that dogs are on a leash within that area. I think prohibiting them in that area is quite extreme, and as a regional council, I think we should be more supportive and encouraging of outdoor activities, and I don't feel this breaches that.
Okay. You want to move that way? Yep. Councillor Haybick.
See, I must support those comments. We've got so many playgrounds right throughout across the council. Some of them, the majority of them, are not fenced, so people can walk through the park. And if the dogs are under proper control, that's all it should be. I don't see the sense in saying, well, they can't be within so many metres of the playground because the playground is fenced. How do we determine where the playground boundary is when they're not fenced? That's the first thing. And so forth. So people have the right to wander through the parks. The dogs are under proper care and control. That's how it should be. Now, if they go near a playground and the dog is under proper care and control, so be it. That's the way around. I don't think there should be any limit of metres where you can't go within the bounds of a playground.
I agree with you, actually.
Councillor Johnston.
I don't want to pick a fight over this, but there are a significant portion of children who are terrified of dogs for one reason or another. And I'll just urge some caution. This bylaw is consistent with what the Dog and Cat Management Board have seen. There's a letter from Gail Gregor saying that the CEO of Dog and Cat Management Board supporting what we've got in place. I'm sure this is going to be observed by its breach, but there are children who are terrified of dogs, and if you can't make it possible for them to go to playgrounds, then dogs, children, which comes first? And I think this bylaw as it stands is right. And by the way, my 2 dogs cannot be off the lead, and I wouldn't let them anywhere near a children's playground.
I'm going to suggest to the meeting that we have that motion there.
Beagles.
And if I get a mover and a second of that, or you can, if you want to have further debate around the dogs, you could move and second the recommendations excluding bylaw 5. So I'll leave it up to the meeting, but I think we're starting to play around with dismantling where we're at. So, Councillor.
I'd like to move an amended motion.
I haven't got a motion, so you can move a motion.
So essentially the motion as it is, but with that change that we've just discussed, so.
And bring back to a further report on that?
Yeah, perhaps we need to withdraw that particular bylaw to make things simpler here, because we obviously have a number of bylaws.
Okay, so we're clear, you're moving the motion as recommended. excluding bylaw 5 to do with dogs, pending a further report.
Is that the best way to do it? I mean, it's simple.
Beg pardon?
If we just need to make that change.
Well, I'm not
Is that the
certain that's
simplest
the
way?
general consensus of the council, so will it?
I mean, yeah, I'm happy to have a debate.
I'm
So,
happy to
yeah.
second that. Just a question before though, Mr Elding, sorry, I'm happy to second it, but just as a question to Mr Elding, if that particular bylaw is not in place, I guess we would just default to the current dog bylaws until such time as it's changed, is that correct? So we wouldn't be in a limbo state if we did that, if we held it over for a month.
I can take that one there. For you, we have existing bylaws in place at the moment. They expire early next year.
Okay, so we do have time to discuss this further.
We do have time. It'll be pushing the limits of
I'm
the
happy
law.
to second the motion.
Thank you. You want to speak to the?
So what are we going to be doing?
Yeah, I will speak to it. Obviously, we're not talking about that particular bylaw at the moment, but I did touch on our communications and our consultation before. I was really disappointed to read that the website only had 21 visits during the consultation period across our council area. I think that's really poor. I'm not sure if that was 21 unique viewers or if it was 21 visits in total. It could have been one person going there 20 times. It's very hard when we're trying to put through 7 different bylaws here with changes to them to expect the community to actually understand what changes are being made. And there's other little things in some of these other bylaws that I think are worthy of more attention as well. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I do think, and we've discussed this numerous times in this chamber, our communication strategies and how we improve our consultation with the community. I spoke earlier about putting an ad in the paper. Well, that's all well and good to notify people what's going on, but perhaps we need to go further and actually have a conversation with the community, have a conversation with the paper to make sure that they understand what's being proposed in these bylaws so that we are getting an effective consultation one way or another. I have my own opinion on some of these bylaws, but the majority might disagree with them. That's probably it for now. I've got more to talk about on the other stuff, but we can discuss that at another day. But I will touch on, I did say obviously some people may disagree, and yes, some kids may be scared of dogs, but I think that comes back to parental responsibility and education too. So I don't think we should be limiting one group as a result of another. I think we need to be looking at it a bit more broadly than that.
Councillor Breeze?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, look, I think Councillor Smith has made some very good points. We do live in the country. There is an expectation that life here is different to the city. That's why people come here. And one of those things is that we have a greater interaction with animals in the country. And also, I agree with Councillor Smith that yes, some children may be frightened of animals and may be frightened of dogs, and that is regrettable. But there are also many children who to whom their dogs are their best friends. So, it's not like this is a change that we're introducing where there's going to be no downside, and it may well be that the downside is significantly greater than the upside, given that from what we've been hearing, there up until this date has been no problem. So we're trying to solve a problem that currently has not eventuated. It's an expected problem that may occur into the future, but we're restricting people's freedoms and people's quality of life now on the off chance that we might prevent something that has never happened before from occurring in the future. Okay, I can see the logic of that, and that is an absolutely legitimate approach. But how risk averse does this council want to be? Do we want to wrap everybody up in cotton wool? Do we want to reduce so much of our freedoms and so much of our liberties? And quite frankly, I think a lot of us, given the COVID experience of the last 2 years, maybe getting a bit tired of having freedoms and liberties restricted. So I too would like to actually see this fully explained to the community in such a way that they really do understand what we're talking about. Because sometimes one bylaw buried in amongst a range of bylaws can be missed. I think if we were to run this past the pub test, I suspect a lot of people would have a very different view to the one that is currently being voiced. So I would like to see that explored a little further. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Shelley?
Right.
Yes, I'm a dog walker and walk past parks daily, and I just think it's a common sense that if you walk past a playground and there's somebody there with a child and you've got dogs, you don't go near it. But if you have dogs and you want to use the playground and you're the only ones there, well then I can't see the problem, you know, if they're not fenced. So there has to be some common sense that prevails in this decision as well.
Maybe the wording could be if children.
Yes.
Through you, Mr Mayor, so bylaw 5 has been removed and clause 2 has been added in there. So bylaw 5 remain unchanged and a further report be brought back to council.
Yeah, it's very, very well worded, thank you.
Mr Mavronek?
I just hope councillors to, when they reconsider the dog bylaw, to consider whether we strengthen the ability to have dogs put down if there is an event of a attack, because at the moment we have very good discretion in terms of dealing with where there is attack on an individual, and it is a long drawn out process when we have to negotiate between parties where there is an attack. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to start playing around with the bylaw, that we probably give our officers the ability to actually order the destruction of a dog.
So can I suggest that then we sort of put this on a workshop so we
quite possibly
we can have that?
Because I think if you're going to allow dogs to have broader freedom, you have to take the consequence of that as well.
Fair enough.
It's worthy of discussion.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, Mayor, the comment was made about children. My little boy likes dogs, but he gets frightened. My daughter's got 2 big dogs, and it's all very well to say it's up to the parents' responsibility, but when a child is there, they react before we can. And we've had them in the train park down here where people come along with dogs and they're not on a leash. So it's the minority that muck it up for the majority. But if he got bitten or killed, and we've seen it happen in Adelaide, who's going to answer to that? And, we're getting personal things. I see Councillor Johnson was nodding his head, and he's got 2 dogs of his own, but my daughter's dogs just go ballistic, and yet they can control them, but out on their own, I think it's a big issue, and we can't just be flippant about it.
No, and I don't think anyone is, Councillor.
No, I'm not saying we are flippant, but we can't be flippant about it.
I think where we're at is that the motion is that we're just going to agree to those others, and then we'll come back and have some further discussions on these points.
There is the option to lay there is the option to lay all on the table.
No, the rest's fine.
I think we'll deal with it as it is. Yep, okay, look, any further other comments? If not, we can, yes, councillor.
Do we need to insert a date in that bit when it's going to come back to council, or is that being a little bit too much on staff?
At the next meeting.
I think we can list it for the next workshop, and I'm not certain what the agenda is for the next workshop, but I think we've still got the current bylaw, so there's an opportunity. But I guess question, Mr. Turley, if we then workshop this and have a different opinion, we would have to go into consultation with that particular bylaw.
Yes, there can still be a report.
That's right.
Correct, and through you, if we change it too much, we're going to have to go back out to consultation. By altering the bylaw in accordance with some of the comments, it's actually relaxing it a little bit. So I would have to seek some legal advice, and we need to get that bylaw redrafted. But I would need to seek some advice as to whether we need to go back to consultation or not, because it is effectively a relaxation, it's not extra restrictions.
So as a mover and second, do you want a time in there, or?
Well,
I'm not fussed.
we need some sort of report by the next.
By the end of the
It doesn't have to be the final report, and we haven't actually made any decision on this one way or the other. We haven't said, well, we may end up going with this, but we just feel we need more discussion, so.
Yeah, that's right,
And the rest of the bylaws, we don't have an issue with, so.
No, okay. And that's a fair point. We may have the workshop and then you're happy with the bylaw too, that's the other side, so. All right. you're happy with where that stands? You close the debate, please.
If everyone's done. I just wanted to pick up on something Councillor Schilling said, which was regarding common sense. At the end of the day, this all comes down to common sense.
Can
Whether
you
you're
just speak up? Can't hear.
I said at the end of the day, this all comes down to common sense. Whether you're a parent, whether you're a dog owner, we all have responsibilities to make sure that our children are behaving, that our dogs are behaving, and we have laws already in place that require dog owners have their dogs under effective control. So I don't believe we are relaxing any laws here. We're imposing a further restriction and further red tape. As I said, I don't agree with that sort of bureaucratic decision making. I think we need to look at this from a common sense perspective. We're a regional council, we encourage outdoor activity. We don't want to limit families' abilities to have that outdoor activity. Just as there are bad dogs, there's bad kids. As I said, we've all got responsibilities and we need to have common sense at the end of the day, and that's all I'm seeking to see here by, asking that dogs be on a leash under effective control within 5 metres of a playground, not anything else. I can't see how that's a relaxing of what the current bylaws already are.
Thank you. Put the motion as it's been put up on the screen. All those in favour? Carried. Against? Oh, I think every hand was up, okay. Members, that moves us to our confidential item.
Move that we go into confidential.
Yeah, I just moved Councillor De Vries, seconded Councillor Miller. All those in favour? This is to deal with the Santos Tour Down Under 2022 alternate event. All good? Okay, members, that's the conclusion of our September meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is October. Thank you for your attendance, and if you